Here at WinOwl, we tell stories that are not comfortable, but they are necessary. Stories that look a little too much like real life, the silent humiliation, the desire that shows up late, the dignity you claw back when no one is betting on you anymore. If you're here, it's because something in all of that is tugging at you from the inside. So before we begin, let me be clear, subscribe to the WinOwl channel, hit like on this video, and share it with someone who's ever felt like they were left out of their own life. Here, you're going to hear confessions that scrape, but also new ways of getting back up. Today I'm going to tell you the story of a grandmother who paid for her granddaughter's wedding, and still got erased from the picture. A woman who went from managing the accounts to becoming a shame that had to be hidden. And I'm also going to tell you how that contempt opened a door no one saw coming, a late-in-life love, a book club that turned into a trench, and a writing workshop where an older woman decided she was done asking for permission. In the end, you'll be the one to decide whether what she did was right, or just another kind of revenge dressed up as dignity. I'm going to say this in a low voice, almost as if it were just you and me, at night, and this were an audio message you don't want anyone else to hear. Because there are slights that make no noise, but rewrite your entire life. My name is Ignacio, I'm 58 years old, and I teach writing workshops for mature women. It sounds more glamorous than it is. In reality, I just walk alongside many of them as they put into words what no one at home wants to hear, their anger, their fantasies, their urge to leave, their nostalgia for the bodies they once had or the bodies they never dared to use. I could tell you a lot of stories, but today's still sits heavy on my chest. Her name was Amelia. The first time I saw her, she was wearing an oversized gray sweater, as if she wanted to shrink herself, and holding a brand new notebook that still smelled like stationery. White hair pulled back in a tight bun, lips bare, hands with raised veins and a faint tremor that wasn't age, it was nerves. She walked into the classroom looking at the floor, but when she lifted her gaze for a second, her eyes were a tired green, like old glass, that didn't match the way she was hunching her shoulders. "Excuse me," she said. "Is this the writing workshop for older ladies?" The way she asked made me laugh on the inside, but on the outside I just nodded. "This is it," I answered. "Come in, there's still room." She sat at the edge, near the door, like someone who doesn't want to be in the way. I already knew that gesture, the gesture of a woman who has spent her whole life asking permission just to exist. Tell me something, how many times have you walked into a room and already felt like you didn't belong there, before you even opened your mouth? The group that term was a particular mix. There were newly divorced women taking their first steps into single life, widows wrestling with the silence of the house, a couple of women who came with the excuse of "my therapist recommended it," and one or two who used the workshop as a disguised social club, expensive clothes, strong perfume, laughter just a little too loud. When I asked them to introduce themselves, Amelia waited until the very end. "I'm Amelia," she said. "I'm 69 years old. I was an elementary school teacher. Now I'm a housewife. A grandmother. And I don't know how to write, I just need to understand what happened." That last sentence was not in the prompt. No one else said they were there to understand what happened. The others talked about exploring my creativity, healing old wounds, fulfilling a long-time dream. But not her. She sounded like she'd come to file a report. "What is it you want to understand?" I asked, careful to keep my voice neutral. Amelia tightened her fingers around the notebook. "Why my granddaughter is getting married, and I'm not invited." Silence dropped instantly. One of the women shifted her chair, another lowered her eyes to her phone, someone else pretended to adjust her bag. It's the typical reaction when someone says out loud a cruelty that's far too common. "But," one of the women ventured, the chattiest of the group, "what do you mean you're not invited, if she's your granddaughter?" Amelia smiled with just one corner of her mouth. I memorized that smile, because she'd repeat it every time she said something that hurt her. "Because I'm an embarrassment," she said. Or that's what they told me, not with those words, but sometimes contempt doesn't need verbs, just gestures. That's when I knew her story wasn't going to be simple. What would you think, if you were her neighbor, her son, her friend? Would you say she must have done something terrible, or that it's the family that's broken? In that moment, the only thing I did was say, If you'd like, you can write it here. Slowly. We're not in a hurry. She nodded, but her eyes fixed on a point on the wall, as if a movie of her own life had just started playing there. Over time, she told me she hadn't started by losing the wedding invitation. It started with smaller losses, decisions, spaces, her voice. Her daughter Raquel, she said, had always been the brilliant one, the one who escaped the neighborhood, the one who never again wanted to smell like stew or bar soap. She studied business administration, married a decent man, they bought an apartment in a nice area. They had Carla, Amelia's granddaughter, who became her greatest joy. You have no idea what that child was like when she was little, she told me once. She'd fall asleep right here on my chest, and she touched the spot, as if she could still feel the weight of that small body, and I used to say, she's the one who's going to remember me. Have you ever clung to someone, convinced that this person is going to be your emotional salvation, your reward for all the years you swallowed everything? Carla grew up, of course. Summers at Grandma's house filled up with homework assignments, made-up stories in the kitchen, long afternoons reading together. Amelia was the one who gave her her first books, the one who taught her how to underline sentences, the one who lit up when the girl said, for the first time, that she wanted to study literature. It was my idea, the book club, Amelia recalled, somewhere between sad and proud. I came up with it before that whole contempt thing I'm going to tell you about even existed. The book club started in Amelia's dining room. A floral tablecloth, coffee in mismatched cups, cheap cookies, and borrowed books from the public library. At first it was just the two of them, the grandmother and the granddaughter. Then two neighbors joined, and a friend of Carla's. They read a bit of everything, romance novels, some classic no one ever finished, short stories that sparked arguments. Those were my favorite days, she told me. I felt that, finally, something about me mattered. Not just my stews, my clean dishes, my bathed grandkids. I'd say what I thought and Carla would look at me like I knew things. Her voice broke on new things, but she didn't cry. Amelia almost never cried. She was one of those women who learned to cry inwardly. In that book club, Carla met Gabriel, the man who would later become her fiancé. He was a friend of one of the girls. He started coming just to listen, but soon he was staying to argue about alternate endings, theories about characters, that kind of obsession you only share when there's a deeper connection. Amelia watched them from the kitchen. She described it to me in detail, as if she were watching a movie in slow motion. She would lean in toward him when she talked, you know, she said. It wasn't that vulgar, obvious flirting. It was delicate. She'd tuck her hair behind her ear and laugh softly. And he'd look at her like everything else had disappeared. Have you ever watched a love story blossom that isn't yours, and felt, at the same time, a strange joy and a cold fear settling in your stomach? Amelia had that fear. Because she knew that when romantic love comes crashing into a young person's life, everything else shifts. And grandparents almost always start losing their place. Over time, the book club stopped meeting at her house. Carla moved it to a trendier cafe. So more people can come, Grandma, so you don't have to prepare everything yourself. She said it with love, but Amelia heard something else, so we can take you out of the center. I kept going, she told me. But it wasn't the same. The girls talked fast, they mentioned authors I didn't know, books by young women complaining about things that, to me, sounded like luxuries. And then they started coming. Raquel, my daughter, and her wife, Gabriella. I remember clearly the first time Amelia described them. She didn't do it with hatred, she did it with an almost surgical precision, like someone dissecting a scene. Raquel always walks in first, she said, as if the door were opening for her and not the other way around. Gabriella comes in half a step behind, but you feel her presence more. She's one of those women who don't need to raise their voice for everyone to know they're there. Beautiful. Elegant. The kind that glance at your old sweater and make you feel ashamed all by yourself. Raquel and Gabriella joined the book club almost out of politeness. To support Carla, they said. But they quickly took control of the conversations. They chose the books, corrected the others, made subtle jokes about grandma-style reading. One time, Amelia recalled, Carla mentioned that I had chosen that month's book. An old novel, one of the kind I like. Gabriella smiled and said, "Oh, yes, the classic book club pick from an old neighborhood." Everyone laughed. Even Carla, though later she apologized with her eyes. Contempt, when it's dressed up as a joke, hurts twice as much. Tell me, in that moment, would you have said something? Would you have confronted your own daughter, your daughter-in-law, in the middle of a cafe full of young people? Amelia didn't. She swallowed the comment. Lowered her gaze to her cup of coffee. The only thing that changed was that night, when she got home, she took her good dress out of the closet and hung it behind the door, so she could see it while she undressed. It was the dress she planned to wear the day Carla got married. There was no engagement yet, but she was already prepared. Grandmothers get ready early for other people's celebrations. It's their way of saying, "I'm still here." The engagement came a few months later. Gabriel got down on one knee at a family dinner, Raquel cried, Gabriella clapped, everyone pulled out their phones to record. Amelia was in the kitchen, serving dessert. She found out because Carla came running in, the ring gleaming on her hand. "Grandma, I'm getting married," she shouted, hugging her from behind, burying her face in her neck. "Look, look." When Amelia told me about it, she closed her eyes as if she were trying to replay that instant there, on my desk. "I felt her arms here," she said, touching her shoulders. Her chest pressed against my back. Her heart was racing. And that smell of cheap perfume mixed with the sweat of excitement. I would have wanted to stop time right there. She hugged her, kissed her forehead, said all the things people say. "You deserve it, you're going to be so happy, I'll be with you every step of the way." She meant it. She still believed that was possible. But reality started to bend the moment words like protocol, official guest list, budget showed up. Raquel worked in event planning. Gabriella, in marketing. Between the two of them, Carla's wedding turned into a project, almost a branding campaign. Everything had to be perfect, Instagrammable, elegant. And in that guest list spreadsheet, Amelia started to become a problem. "Mama, try to understand," Raquel told her at a meeting Amelia never wanted to remember, but had to write down in the workshop. "The venue is small, capacity is limited. And Gabriel's family is huge." They were sitting in Raquel's dining room, not Amelia's. A smooth wooden table, modern chairs, cold white lighting. No floral tablecloth, no smell of broth. It was foreign territory. "But I'm her grandmother," Amelia replied, with a calm that only comes after years of small humiliations. "I don't need a table, Hija. I'll sit in a corner. I'll serve, I'll help, I'll clean up. You know that." Gabriella cut in, smiling, placing a hand over Raquel's. "That's not it, Amelia," she said. "It's more like, let me see how to explain this. It's that Carla wants a more young wedding, you know? A different vibe. Not so traditional family vibe. Young. Traditional. New and old words, all sharpened into knives. There are grandmothers at every wedding," Amelia insisted. "I was a bride once, too." Raquel was no longer looking her in the eyes. She stared at the tablecloth, the wall, her phone. Anything but her mother's face. "Mama, please, don't make this harder," she said. "You know that, you've been very sensitive lately. We don't want you to feel bad that day, with all those people, all that noise. Besides," she hesitated for a second, "you sometimes say things that don't fit. You start telling stories, talking about when we had nothing. And this wedding, we want it to be something else." There it was. The same contempt from the book club, only now without coffee in between. This time it was her own daughter's words pushing her out of the frame. Amelia felt the chair turn to iron beneath her. "Are you ashamed that I tell people I raised you alone?" she asked. "Are you ashamed that they might know that before your expensive heels, I was washing other people's clothes?" Gabriella sighed, with that polite exasperation of someone who believes they're far above other people's drama. "It's not shame, Amelia, it's image," she said. Let's not mix things up. That phrase lodged itself inside Amelia. It's not shame, it's image. Tell me, if someone in your family said that to you, what would you hear? Technically, no one ever said, "You're not invited." There was no clean, explicit line. What there was instead, emails with guest lists, WhatsApp groups she was never added to, an invitation that never arrived. And Raquel's final sentence, in another conversation, closer to the date. "Mama, really, it's better if we watch the wedding together afterward, on video, just the two of us, calm, we'll sit and cry and laugh. It'll be nicer for you. We're really doing this to take care of you. To take care of you." Sometimes, when they say they're taking care of you, what they're really doing is isolating you. Me, the one telling you this, I didn't meet her then. I met her later, after what I'm about to tell you had already happened. Because Amelia, besides starting that book club, had also opened her wallet. She was the one who, from the moment Carla and Gabriel got engaged, began saving for the wedding. She didn't make much, a small teacher's pension, a few extra pesos from tutoring kids who were behind on their reading. But every month she set something aside. "I don't want the girl worrying about the dress," she'd say. "That, I'll pay for." She kept the money in a separate account. She made advance payments, part of the venue rental, a deposit for the band, half of the dress Carla had chosen in a shop where the lights made even the cheapest lace look like luxury. Amelia did all of that with one idea in mind, being there. Seeing her granddaughter walk down the aisle. Wearing a navy blue dress and a brooch that had belonged to her own mother. When she realized she wasn't going to be there, that they really were erasing her, it was late, but not too late. She told me about that scene in the workshop, one of those nights when everyone else had already left and it was just the two of us, the room half in darkness, the air conditioning turned off. "It was in the bank waiting area," she said. "I was sitting there, holding my number, and I started to feel something here." She touched the center of her chest, like someone was squeezing me. "It wasn't a heart attack, don't worry. It was clarity." She looked out the classroom window, toward the street. "I thought, if I'm not enough to sit in a chair, I don't have to be enough to pay for it either." And I got up. I went to the girl at the counter and asked how much I had in my account. When she told me the amount, I felt anger. A lot of it. The dark kind. She had worked, saved, gone without things to put that money together. And now all of it was funding a party she wasn't going to attend. "I canceled everything," she told me, without a trace of doubt. "I made calls. I went to the venue. I told them my name was on the contract. That I wasn't putting in another cent. I lost the deposits, yes. But I stopped the bleeding. Do you think that was pettiness or dignity? I'm asking you seriously. Because the line between one and the other can be very thin." Raquel found out 2 days later. She called screaming, hurling insults, saying how dare she, that she was humiliating her in front of her in-laws, that everything was already set. In the background, Gabriela added poison in a cold tone, talking about responsibility, about moral commitments. "The moral commitment was inviting me," Amelia answered, for the first time without lowering her voice. "I gave my money and they never gave me a chair." The argument did not end well. They said things they'd been storing up for decades. Raquel accused her of playing the victim, Amelia reminded her of feverish nights when she carried her alone. Gabriela said Amelia's entire life was one giant emotional manipulation. Heavy words, after years of polite silence. In the end, the call ended with a very clear message. "Do whatever you want with your money, Mama," Raquel said. "But don't come crying later when Carla walks away from you forever." The threat was there. But sometimes, when you have nothing left to lose, fear just slips out of your pockets. With the money she still had, Amelia did something that surprised even the bank clerk. Instead of moving it to another account or spending it on a new TV, she turned it into cash, put the bills into an envelope, and walked through the city center with no destination in mind. "I could feel the envelope like an extra heart in my bag," she told me. It was heavy. And every time I walked past a store, I heard voices in my head saying, "Buy this, buy that, buy something nice for Carla anyway." But there was another voice, quieter, more tired, that whispered, "What if, just this once, you buy something for you? When was the last time you did something important just for yourself, without justifying it to anyone?" She walked like that for a while, until she saw a flyer taped to the window of a cafe, writing workshop for mature women. Rewrite your story. Underneath, my name, the schedule, and the price for the term. I laughed, she remembered. I thought it was some kind of joke from God. Or fate. Or from boring old life, I don't know. She went in. Asked for the price. When the owner told her, she took part of the money from the envelope, paid the full term up front, and on top of that, bought herself a coffee and a small pastry. I toasted with myself, she said, smiling with a new kind of pride. And I thought, if I'm not going to be in anyone's wedding, at least I'm going to be in the story I write. That's where my part of the story really begins. The day she walked into the workshop with her gray sweater and her brand new notebook, she had already cut the ropes tying her to the wedding. But not to the pain. During the first weeks, Amelia wrote like someone filling out a police report. Dates, names, events. On Tuesday, March 15th, I canceled the venue. On Wednesday the 17th, Raquel called me. On Saturday, Carla didn't come to book club. Everything cold, detailed, almost clinical. I listened to her read and I could feel the rage under all that precision. Like lava beneath a layer of ice. It's very clear what happened, I told her one day. But you still haven't told me what happened to you. She looked at me as if I'd insulted her. I just told you everything, she replied. You told me the facts, I said. Not your body. Not your smells. Not your nights. Not the emptiness in the chair you'd saved for the wedding. She went quiet. That night, she didn't read again. The next session, she showed up with a different kind of text. She didn't announce it, she just cleared her throat and began. That night I dreamed about my blue dress. I was wearing it. I was walking toward a big door. On the other side, I could hear music, laughter, cutlery clinking. I couldn't open it. The handle was hot, as if the party burned. I looked at my hands and they were empty. No bouquet, no envelope. Just the veins showing and an old ring that doesn't shine anymore. I woke up with my chest damp with sweat and the sheets wrinkled like paper. When she finished reading, the room was silent. One of the women had tears shining in her eyes. Another was gripping her pen too tightly. That is your story, I told her. That's you. Amelia looked at me in a way she hadn't before. It wasn't the shy gaze of a student begging for approval. It was something else. A mix of gratitude, curiosity, and something that made me uncomfortable to name, interest. I won't lie to you. I was looking at her differently too. Not as some poor victim grandma, but as a woman who, despite her age, still had fire and pride. Does it make you uncomfortable to think about an older woman's desire? I'm asking because it unsettles a lot of people. They prefer to picture grandmothers as affectionate furniture, not as bodies with memory, hunger, and tenderness. The romantic arc of this story begins here, in tiny details. One afternoon, at the end of class, everyone left except Amelia. She stayed behind, pretending to pack her things very slowly. I was wiping the board when I felt her behind me, close. A little too close to be accidental. Her voice reached me almost at my neck. Ignacio. She whispered. Do you think I still have time to? I don't know, be something other than an invisible grandmother? Her breath was a mix of coffee and mint. I could feel the warmth of her body a step away from mine. She didn't touch me, but the space between us grew charged with an old kind of electricity, the kind that hasn't been used in years and suddenly comes back. I swallowed. I always try to keep things professional, but I have blood, not wires. I think you're already being something else, I answered. You're just the one who hasn't believed it yet. I turned to look at her. We were close enough for me to see the small spots on her skin, the wrinkles around her eyes, the way one corner of her mouth trembled. She wasn't magazine beautiful. She was something else, a lived-in beauty, worn, like a book that's been read many times. For a second, I felt the impulse to touch her hand. It pulsed in the air like an unwritten scene. I didn't do it. But she did rest her fingers on the table, so close to mine that we almost brushed. The faintest contact, barely there, as if she were checking the temperature. Does what I'm telling you sound inappropriate? Do you think that after a certain age, that tiny thrill on the skin is no longer allowed? Amelia started to change. You could see it in everyday details. She left the gray sweater behind and began wearing simple blouses that fit her body a bit more. On the third week, she painted her lips in a discreet red. She tied her hair back with less force, letting a few strands fall loose. Her writing changed too. She moved from the report to the scene. From Raquel said and Gabriella replied to I felt, I thought, I wanted. She began to talk about the nights when she lay down in an empty bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if her voice really was as inconvenient as they'd told her. One night, she wrote something that left all of us in silence. I imagined arriving at the wedding without an invitation. In a simple dress, nothing shiny. I'd sit in the last row, like I always sit on the bus. The waiters would ignore me. No place card with my name. But when Carla walked toward the altar, her eyes would look for me. She wouldn't notice the flowers, or the candles, or the photographer. She'd be looking for me. And I would stand up, even if the others got annoyed, and I'd fix her veil, like when she was a little girl and her sweater kept slipping off her shoulder. When she finished reading, I had to take a deep breath to keep my voice from shaking as I gave her feedback. It wasn't just her pain. It was the clarity with which she saw that this was never going to happen. The wedding was getting closer. In the family WhatsApp group, where no one wrote much anymore, photos started to pop up, Carla's makeup trials, the flowers, the centerpieces. Amelia only saw them because someone messed up and forwarded them to the old chat. She watched from afar, like someone peeking at the party next door from a tiny balcony. And then something happened that changed the trajectory of everything. The night before the wedding, the book club called an emergency meeting at the cafe where they had first met. It wasn't about literature this time. It was about gossip. Did you hear about Carla's grandma? Some were saying. They say she got mad, that she's a drama queen, that she made a whole scene about the money. Gabriella was there, sitting very straight, telling her version of the story. She talked about Amelia's lack of maturity, about how she'd messed up part of the budget, about how hard it was to deal with people who don't understand the times we live in. Carla listened in silence, her gaze lost somewhere in her glass of water. She hadn't invited Amelia to that meeting. In her mind, that meant less conflict. But her grandmother's name was in every sentence. At some point, one of the newer girls in the club, who didn't really know the story, asked something that no one else had dared to say so bluntly. Hey, but isn't it kind of messed up to get married without your grandma there, if she raised you? I mean, aren't you going to miss her tomorrow? The question fell heavy. Gabriella grimaced. Raquel wasn't there. Carla swallowed hard. It's just that grandma, Amelia, she's very intense, she stammered. I don't want drama at my wedding. The new girl pushed on, with that clumsy honesty of someone who doesn't yet know the rules of a broken family. But the drama's already there, she said. You're leaving her out. That's drama too. Just without her voice. That night, Carla didn't sleep well. She realized something she'd been dodging, that in her attempt to have a clean wedding, free of uncomfortable stories, she'd turned her grandmother into a living ghost. Has it ever happened to you that a stray sentence from someone who barely knows you hits harder than 1,000 speeches from your own family? Meanwhile, in her own home, Amelia didn't sleep either. Not because she was thinking about the wedding, but about something else. She had just finished writing a short story for the workshop, a grandmother who, instead of going to the wedding, checked into a cheap hotel in the city, ordered a glass of wine, and watched, from the window, as other parties lit up in other buildings. In the story, the grandmother ended up dancing alone in front of the mirror, in some random dress, laughing at herself. I've never danced alone in front of a mirror, she confessed to me. I'd be embarrassed. as if someone might be watching. I told her maybe her character would do it. That sometimes our characters are the braver version of ourselves. The morning of the wedding, Amelia did something none of us imagined. She put on a simple outfit, a light blouse and dark pants. It wasn't the blue dress she'd saved for the wedding. She left that one in the closet, hanging there like the lives that are never going to happen. She grabbed her workshop notebook, a pen, and went to the park across from the church where she knew Carla was getting married. She knew the time, the place, everything. She knew because, even if they hadn't invited her, information leaks. Big families always have cracks. She sat on a bench under a tree. From there, she could see the church door. She had no intention of going in. She didn't want a scene. She just wanted to see her granddaughter from afar, to confirm with her own eyes that she was okay, that she was getting married, that she was living that dream. I didn't bring flowers or a gift, she told me. I brought my notebook. I decided I was going to write down every detail. Not for them. For me. She started jotting things down, the color of the flowers at the entrance, the shine of the cars, the laughter of the young women, the sound of heels on the tiles. And then, suddenly, she saw her. Carla stepped out of a decorated car, in a white dress that didn't look anything like the ones Amelia had seen her try on in magazines. It was simpler. Her hair was pulled back in a loose braid. And her eyes were searching for something. The bride's gaze crossed her grandmother's. From a distance. Just for a second. Amelia felt time split in two. Carla stopped. The photographers grew impatient. Gabriel stared at her, confused. The family began to murmur. And instead of walking straight toward the door, she walked toward the bench. Her veil brushed against the bushes. Her dress picked up tiny leaves. She didn't notice. Her eyes were fixed on Amelia. "Grandma," she whispered, once she was close enough. "What are you doing here?" Amelia, as she told me, didn't cry. She held her head high. "I came to see if you looked beautiful," she said, mentally noting the tremor in her granddaughter's voice. "And you do. You look stunning." Carla swallowed. Her hands were trembling around the bouquet. "Forgive me," she blurted out, with a strange urgency for someone about to get married. "Forgive me for all of this. I'm a coward." Behind them, from the church door, Gabriella raised her voice. "Carla, please, come on. The ceremony is about to start." Raquel was calling her too, nervous, waving her hands as if she were shooing away pigeons. Carla didn't move. "I can't get married like this," she said, more to herself than to her grandmother. "I can't walk into that church knowing you're outside, excluded, because of me." Amelia felt her heart rise into her throat. "Don't say because of me," she replied. "It was a decision made by several people. You're just the only one who seems to see it." Carla looked at her the way she did when she was a little girl and asked if she'd answered something right on a test. "What do I do, Grandma?" she whispered. "Do I go in and pretend nothing's wrong? Or do I stop all of this? Tell me." "Here, I'm telling you, the story could have gone full cheap melodrama, the bride who cancels the wedding at the church door, who runs off with her grandmother, who hands back the ring. But real life is more complicated. And this story is about dignity, not spectacle." Amelia took a deep breath. "Go in," she told her. "You're already here, you're already dressed, all these people are already waiting for you. Don't do this to Gabriel. Don't do it to yourself. But go in knowing one thing, I am not walking through that door without an invitation. Not out of pride, but out of respect for myself. If one day you want us to share something, let it not be because you felt guilty, but because you truly chose it." Carla was crying now, her perfect makeup was starting to run. "I don't want you to be a ghost in my life," she sobbed. "I want you to be what you've always been." "Then start by not erasing me from your stories," Amelia replied. "Tell them about me when you talk about how you grew up. Don't make up a spotless past." That will be your way of inviting me. They hugged. Right there, in the middle of the park, with the church waiting, the guests whispering, the photographer fuming. The hug was brief, but intense. Amelia felt the fabric of the dress, the stiffness of the corset, the smell of flowers from the bouquet mixing with Carla's strong perfume. She felt, too, the pounding heartbeat in her granddaughter's chest pressed against her own war-tired body. A moment of non-romantic erotism, if you want to see it that way, the body at the start of life pressed against the body that has already survived many battles. Carla pulled away, took a deep breath, wiped her tears as best she could. "I'm going to come find you," she said. "When all this is over. I'm going to go wherever you are. Not to this house, not to Mom's. To wherever you decide to be. I want to really know you, Grandma. Not just as the one who took care of me as a kid." Amelia nodded. "I'm only just getting to know myself," she answered. "I'm writing. I'll show you later." Carla smiled, weakly, and walked back toward the church. This time she didn't look at the photographer, or her mother-in-law. She looked straight ahead, but she carried Amelia's embrace under the dress, right against her skin. Amelia stayed on the bench. She didn't move. She listened to the bells, the music, the distant applause. And she opened her notebook. She began to write the scene she had just lived. In detail. Slowly. With that strange blend of sorrow and pride. "That was my rite of passage," she told me later. "Not seeing the wedding, but writing it from the outside." A few days later, Carla kept her word. She didn't go to Amelia's house. She went to the cafe where the workshop was held. She showed up in jeans, no dress, no veil, her hair down, with the face of someone who hasn't slept much. She walked in just as we were finishing the session. The other women stared at her with curiosity. Amelia saw her from the back of the room. Her eyes lit up in a way I hadn't seen before. "Is this the workshop for women who write their own story?" Carla asked from the doorway. Me, who'd seen plenty of scenes like that, I knew this wasn't just another one. "This is it," I said. "Are you looking for someone?" "I'm looking for Amelia," she answered. "And, if possible, I'm also looking for a place." Soft laughter rippled through the group. One of the women clapped quietly. Amelia stood up. Walked toward her. She didn't hug her right away. She looked at her first, with a new kind of seriousness. "If you come in here," she said, "I'm not going to take care of you as a grandmother. I'm going to read you as a woman." Carla nodded, swallowing hard. "That's exactly what I want," she replied. They hugged, this time with no veil, no awkward witnesses, no expectation of a photo. It was a different kind of embrace. Longer. More aware. I watched them, and I won't pretend I didn't feel something in my gut. A mix of tenderness and envy. Not everyone gets the chance to rewrite a family bond from scratch. Carla stayed for the workshop that day. She listened to the others read. She listened to her grandmother tell a scene from when she was little and got sick, and Amelia had to improvise a remedy with whatever she had on hand. She laughed in places where, before, she would have felt ashamed. Her eyes grew wet when Amelia described how she watched her sleep. At the end, Carla came up to me. "Are you Ignacio?" she asked. "The one and only," I said. "My grandma talks about you a lot," she smiled, with a mischievous glint in her eye. "She says you taught her how to give memories a smell." Amelia blushed a little in the back. That scene, I'll admit, had a different kind of tension. It wasn't a love triangle, don't get me wrong. It was something more delicate, the granddaughter sensing, with a fine intuition, that her grandmother and I shared an intimacy that had nothing to do with blood. Do you think that intimacy is okay? Do you think a man like me, with his own loneliness, can feel something for an older student without crossing any lines? I'm asking because I don't have an easy answer. All I know is that, with time, my relationship with Amelia grew closer. Once, after class, we stayed behind to work on a text. The cafe was about to close, the lights were dimming, the clatter of dishes being washed hummed in the background. We sat together in front of her notebook. My fingers brushed hers when I pointed to a sentence. "Here," I said, pressing the tip of my finger on the word shame, "here you could add a smell. Something concrete. What did that kitchen smell like when you said this?" She stopped to think. Very close. I could feel the warmth of her arm next to mine. "It smelled like burnt beans," she whispered. "Because I got distracted arguing with Raquel on the phone, and they were ruined." As she said it, her voice dropped without her noticing. I felt her breath on my cheek. For a second, our heads almost touched. If someone had seen us from the outside, they would have assumed all sorts of things. But inside that moment, what there was a strange mix of learning, tenderness, and carefully contained desire. We didn't do anything. We didn't need to. Some relationships are built on the tension of what never happens. Over time, Amelia started getting small pieces published in local magazines, on blogs for older women. Strangers would write to thank her for putting into words things they were living too, feeling pushed aside, used as caretakers, erased from the photos. Carla helped her with social media. "Grandma, look, a lady from another country wrote to you," she'd say, showing her the phone. "She says her daughter also left her out of her wedding." Amelia no longer cried when she read those messages. She took a breath, nodded slowly, and said, "Then I'm not the only ghost who decided to make herself visible." Things with Raquel and Gabriella moved much more slowly. There was no soap opera reconciliation. Months went by without seeing each other. Then came a lukewarm invitation to grab coffee. A tense conversation. A partial admission of guilt. Gabriella never apologized directly. But one day, in the middle of some random small talk, she said, "In the end, the problem wasn't your image, Amelia. It was ours. We didn't know how to show it." That was as close to an apology as she could manage. For her own sanity, Amelia chose to take it as one. "I don't need them to love me as a perfect grandmother," she told me. "It's enough for me that they understand I exist." As for me, Ignacio, I got to walk beside her through all of that. And yes, I also had to deal with my own feelings. There was one night, after a public reading where Amelia presented one of her texts, when we walked together to the subway station. The city was damp, smelling of recent rain. She wore a light-colored coat, I had on a dark blazer. "I never thought I'd be reading in public at this age," she said. "Much less that anyone would clap for me." "It's never too late," I answered, the most honest cliché there is. We stopped at a corner because the light was red. She turned toward me, very close. The glow of a neon sign painted her skin in strange colors. Her green eyes, those old bottle eyes, were shining. "You helped me with that too," she whispered. "With not disappearing." I don't know if it was the moment, the humidity, the light, the story itself. But I felt a strong, almost teenage urge. I lifted my hand and tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. My fingers brushed her temple, her skin thin and soft. She closed her eyes for a second, as if that small gesture had reached somewhere deep inside. We didn't kiss. Not on the mouth. But she tilted her head a little, and my lips grazed the line where her hair meets her temple, a tiny, almost accidental caress. The light turned green. Cars started moving again. We crossed. "If we were young, this would be a disaster," she joked, with a sad little smile. "If we were young, we wouldn't know what to do with this," I replied. "At least now we know how not to ruin what we do have." What we had was a clean kind of complicity, made of words, of shared silences, of long looks across the workshop table. Hands that brushed over a sheet of paper, backs that accidentally touched when we both leaned toward the same paragraph. That was our romance, contained, mature, a little cowardly, and deeply tender. And if I'm honest, I sometimes think it was better that way. Amelia is still writing. Carla too. Raquel, little by little, has started coming to some readings, sitting in the back, listening, not interrupting. Gabriella, from the last row, records short videos to post online, promoting Amelia's texts. It's ironic, the same woman who once said image was the problem is now the one showing the world the image of that grandmother she once tried to erase. The original book club doesn't exist the way it used to. Now, every so often, we organize a new, open one at the cafe. Women of all ages show up. They read novels, short stories, sometimes Amelia's own pieces. No one makes jokes about grandma reads anymore. Because now, when someone looks at an older woman and dares to belittle her, they know they might be dismissing a writer. I told you at the beginning that this was the story of a grandmother erased from her granddaughter's wedding. But maybe it's more accurate to say it's the story of how that grandmother chose to erase herself from a place where she wasn't wanted, so she could write herself into a place where she was. It's up to you to decide whether what she did with the money was an act of pettiness or an act of self-love. Whether staying outside the wedding was dignity or wounded pride. Whether our quiet, late-blooming romance was a mistake or an honest way of keeping each other company in our loneliness. Me, after all this, I only know one thing: no one deserves to be treated like an old piece of furniture you move out of the shot so the picture looks nice. And you tell me. What would you have done in Amelia's place? Would you have gone to the wedding anyway, without an invitation, to sit in the last row? Would you have kept paying for a party that was pushing you out? Do you think Carla deserves her grandmother's forgiveness, or does she still owe something more? And what do you think of this late affection between Amelia and me? Does it feel clean, selfish, human? Leave your answers in the comments. I want to read you. I want to know what you'd do with your dignity, your family, your desire, if you ever found yourself in the middle of a slight like this. If this story stirred something inside you, if it reminded you of your grandmother, your mother, or yourself, subscribe to the WinOwl channel, hit like on this video, and share it with someone who's ever felt invisible in their own family. Maybe, by listening to this, they'll also find a way to rewrite their story. At the end of the day, it's the only thing we really have left, the way we tell what they did to us, and what we decide to do with it.